The ballroom shimmered under golden chandeliers, the clink of champagne flutes blending with the hum of New York's elite. Richard Cole, the Wall Street banker whose name carried both admiration and suspicion, stood at the podium with a confident smile. His voice rolled over the crowd, polished and commanding, every syllable meant for cameras and investors. But halfway through his toast, Richard's words slurred. He clutched the edge of the podium, glass slipping from his hand. A hush spread like a wave, then chaos erupted as his tall frame crumpled to the marble floor. Gasps cut through the music. Phones shot into the air, recording as shouts of "Call 911" echoed. EMTs burst through, weaving past panicked guests in gowns and tuxedos. Richard's wife, Vanessa, knelt beside him, mascara streaking, while his younger brother Michael hovered a step back, fists clenched. The banker's pulse was erratic, his skin clammy. "Something's wrong with his system," one medic muttered. "Not a heart attack." As they lifted Richard onto the stretcher, Detective Elena Vargas slipped through the crowd, her badge flashing. Sharp-eyed, steady, she clocked every detail. A half-empty champagne flute with residue clinging to the rim, a small clear vial abandoned beneath the tablecloth. Not the sort of accident one overlooked. Whispers rippled. Was it poison? Did someone spike his drink? A few guests glanced toward Michael, who moments earlier had been seen gesturing heatedly at his brother near the podium. Vargas caught his arm before he could follow the stretcher. Cameras still flashed, immortalizing his pale face and her firm grip. She leaned in, voice low but edged with steel. "Michael," she said, "why were you arguing with him just before the collapse?" By dawn, headlines screamed across every major outlet. Wall Street titan collapses at gala. Reporters camped outside Lenox Hill Hospital, cameras primed for the family's first statement. When the glass doors slid open, Vanessa Cole emerged, a vision of control in black silk and pearls. Her voice, though soft, carried over the chaos of shouted questions. "My husband suffered a sudden medical episode," she said, eyes glistening just enough for the lenses. Richard was a devoted father, a loyal partner, and a man of integrity. "We ask for privacy during this difficult time." She clutched a tissue, dabbing carefully at her cheek. Yet Detective Vargas, observing from the fringe, caught the subtle stiffness in her posture. Her gaze never lingered on the cameras, nor on Richard's brother, who hovered a few feet away. Michael's expression was unreadable. Jaw set, shoulders tight. Every time Vanessa spoke of Richard's loyalty, his eyes flickered, as though swallowing a bitter pill. Inside the hospital, whispers spread faster than lab results. Staff spoke of inconsistencies in Richard's vitals, a toxin disrupting his nervous system. Vargas knew it wasn't a coincidence. The vial, the residue, the timing. It all screamed deliberate. But motive still hung in the air like perfume after a gala. Back at the Cole residence that night, the neighborhood buzzed. Neighbors huddled on stoops, speculating about secrets behind the mansion's shuttered windows. One elderly woman, tugging her coat tighter, leaned toward Vargas as she passed. "Detective," the woman whispered, voice gravelly with certainty. "Don't believe a word from her. I saw Vanessa last night. No tears, no grief. She wasn't mourning. She was celebrating." The words lingered like smoke, casting a darker shadow over the widow's perfect composure. In the sterile glow of the forensics lab, the truth began to take shape. Richard's blood panel returned not with signs of cardiac failure, but with traces of midazolam, a rare sedative usually restricted to clinical settings. It wasn't something a man slipped into his own champagne by accident. Detective Vargas studied the toxicology report under the humming fluorescent lights. "Whoever planned this knew dosage and timing," the lab tech said, sliding a vial across the steel counter. "It would have incapacitated him in minutes." Meanwhile, the Financial Crimes Division combed through Richard's accounts. Rows of numbers told a different kind of story. irregular withdrawals, large sums vanishing into untraceable destinations. Vargas tapped the table, unsettled. "Looks like hush money," the analyst remarked. Either he was paying someone off, or someone was bleeding him dry. At Richard's office downtown, the search turned up more than balance sheets. A safe tucked behind a framed photo of his children clicked open with a code scribbled in, his assistant's planner. Inside, among deeds and sealed folders, lay an envelope bound in crimson ribbon. Vargas slid it open carefully. The letters inside were intimate, breathless, filled with promises of secret meetings. The handwriting was neat, looping, unmistakably personal. Each page signed with the same flourish. "Yours, M." She read one, line aloud under her breath. "I can't bear watching you across the table when I should be beside you in bed." The initials gnawed at her. Michael Cole, Richard's brother, fit too easily. But nothing was yet certain. As she closed the envelope, Vargas's phone buzzed. It was hospital security, calling about a new detail in the surveillance review. They'd spotted someone entering Richard's office building late at night. 2 nights before the gala. The figure? Michael Cole. The interrogation room was dim, walls painted a weary gray, the hum of the ceiling fan punctuating silence. Michael Cole sat across from Detective Vargas, suit jacket folded on the table, shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He carried himself with the air of a man used to being underestimated, though his eyes betrayed fatigue. "You were seen entering Richard's office 2 nights before the gala," Vargas said evenly, sliding a still image from the surveillance feed across the table. Michael glanced at it, jaw tightening. "I went to talk to him," he admitted. "Family business. That's not a crime." "What kind of business requires sneaking in after hours?" Vargas countered. Michael leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Richard and we didn't see eye to eye. He flaunted his success, made me feel like nothing. Always the golden boy." His voice cracked, then steadied. "But I didn't kill him. I may have argued with him, but that's all it was." Vargas studied his face, noting the flicker of envy whenever Richard's name surfaced. The brothers. Resentment felt old, calcified, something deeper than money. "You know what I think, Michael?" she pressed, leaning forward. "I think you got tired of living in his shadow. I think you finally decided to step out." Michael's fists clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. He didn't deny the bitterness. Instead, his lips twisted into a grim smile. "Detective, you think Richard was some saint?" "He wasn't. His marriage was a performance. Vanessa knew it. Everyone knew it. He was hiding things you can't even imagine." The implication landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples across the case. Vargas kept her eyes locked on his. "If that's true," she said, "then tell me who the hell M really is." Michael's silence was deafening. The penthouse suite felt more like a museum than a home, glass, steel, and white leather arranged with surgical precision. Evelyn Cole, Michael's wife, sat on the edge of a sleek sofa, her hands folded too, tightly in her lap. The skyline glowed behind her, but she kept her eyes down as though afraid of its reflection. Detective Vargas laid the love letters on the coffee table, the crimson ribbon unraveling like a wound reopening. Evelyn's breath caught. "You recognize the handwriting," Vargas said, not as a question but as a fact. Evelyn's denial came quick, brittle. "I don't know what this is. Some cruel fabrication." Vargas pushed one letter closer, finger tracing the ink. "The loops, the flourishes, they're yours. Forensics won't lie." Evelyn's composure cracked. Tears welled, spilling as she pressed a hand to her mouth. "Richard promised me. He said he'd leave Vanessa. We were in love. Do you understand? For years I felt invisible. Michael barely noticed I existed. Richard, he saw me." Her confession hung heavy, the silence broken only by the ticking of a wall clock. "And Michael?" Vargas pressed. "He knew nothing?" Evelyn shook her head, voice trembling. No, he couldn't. He would never forgive me. Vargas studied her carefully. The grief felt genuine, but it was tangled with guilt, manipulation. Too many layers to trust. Then explain this, Vargas said, sliding over the surveillance still. Evelyn froze. The figure in the frame wore her coat, her silhouette unmistakable, entering Richard's penthouse on the day he collapsed. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Finally, she whispered, voice breaking. That wasn't me. The denial landed like a thunderclap, reshaping the puzzle entirely, away. The lining still faintly carried traces of her perfume. Whoever wore it that night wanted to erase the proof. Meanwhile, Vargas uncovered bank transfers, large, deliberate, wired from Richard's accounts into Evelyn's name. $250,000, 3 months before the gala. Looks less like love, Harper said, scanning the paperwork, and more like a payout. At home, tension flared between Evelyn and Michael. He confronted her in their kitchen, voice low but seething. How long, Evelyn? How long were you lying to me? She couldn't answer, only lowering her eyes, tears staining her cheeks. Back at the precinct, Vargas pinned the surveillance still to the evidence board, the burned coat photo beside it. Then came the call. A masked figure had been seen on another angle, briefly catching the camera's eye before ducking out of frame. Same build, same coat, but not Evelyn's face. Rain streaked the glass of the Cole mansion as Detective Vargas stepped inside, the scent of lilies clashing with the tension in the air. Vanessa Cole, draped in a tailored black dress, sat stiffly in the drawing room, her hands clasped too tightly around a crystal tumbler of untouched whiskey. You know about the affair, Vargas said, skipping pleasantries. You've known for some time. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward the fire, her jaw tightening. Do you think I built this life, not knowing what kind of man Richard was? He strayed. He lied. I tolerated it. For the family. For appearances. Her voice faltered, and the mask slipped. Just a fraction. The widow who had stood polished at the hospital press conference now looked frayed, a crack spidering across porcelain. Vargas circled slowly, her tone softening. So when you found out it was Evelyn, your sister-in-law, how did that sit with you? The glass shook in Vanessa's hand. Humiliation is the cruelest poison, Detective. Everyone looking at me, wondering how long I'd been a fool. Her voice dropped. I wanted him to suffer for it, but I didn't kill him. A knock interrupted them. A nervous young man, tuxedo slightly wrinkled, stepped into the room. He was one of the gala waiters, cheeks flushed as though stepping into enemy territory. I need to say something, he stammered, eyes darting between the detective and the widow. I saw her, Mrs. Cole. She was the one who handed Richard his last glass of champagne. I'm certain of it. The room froze. Vanessa's grip tightened, the tumbler cracking under pressure as whiskey spilled over her fingers. Her eyes, cold and unblinking, locked onto Vargas. The statement room was silent except for the faint buzz of a desk lamp. Vanessa sat across from Detective Vargas, hands folded, her posture deliberate. She no longer looked shaken. She looked ready to fight. The waiter's mistaken, Vanessa said firmly. Yes, I attended to Richard at the gala, but I didn't give him that glass. I couldn't have. She slid her phone across the table. Vargas scrolled through a thread of time-stamped messages. The widow's texts showed she'd been coordinating with Richard's assistant about a foundation donation during the exact minute the waiter swore she'd delivered the drink. Convenient, Vargas murmured, eyes narrowing. Vanessa leaned in. Detective, I may be many things. A wife scorned, a woman humiliated. But I am not a murderer. Check the timestamps. Check the server towers. They'll hold up. Harper stepped into the room, file in hand. Forensics just called. That vial from the gala? He dropped the folder onto the table. Evelyn's fingerprints all over it. Vanessa's lips curved, just barely. Perhaps you've been barking up the wrong tree. Vargas kept her gaze steady on the widow, unwilling to give her the satisfaction. Still, the revelation shifted the ground beneath her feet. Evelyn had denied poisoning Richard, had painted herself as the victim of Richard's manipulation. Yet the science was irrefutable. Her hands had touched the instrument of death. Later, in the precinct bullpen, Vargas stared at the evidence board. Threads of suspicion stretched like spider silk between Vanessa, Evelyn, and Michael, each motive tangled in betrayal, greed, humiliation, and yet, the timing gnawed at her. If Vanessa's alibi held, the waiter had misremembered, or lied. If Evelyn's prints were on the vial, then why had the figure in her coat gone to such lengths to obscure their face? One truth was certain. Someone wanted the sisters-in-law pitted against each other. The interrogation chamber's air felt heavy, as though every secret lingered there, clinging to the walls. Evelyn sat hunched forward, her makeup streaked, fingers trembling as she clutched a crumpled tissue. Across from her, Vargas laid the forensic report on the table with deliberate weight. "Your fingerprints were on the vial, Evelyn. Not Vanessa's. Not Michael's. Yours." Evelyn shook her head violently. "I didn't kill him. I touched it, yes, but weeks ago. Richard gave it to me. He said it was for his insomnia. I never—" Her voice cracked, breaking into a whisper. "This is a setup." Vargas's eyes narrowed. "Then who set you up?" Evelyn's face hardened, her tears replaced by fury. "Michael, my husband. He found out about Richard and me. Do you think he'd let that humiliation stand? He hated Richard his whole life, envied him. The money, the spotlight. Me." She jabbed a finger at the detective. "He's the one who wanted Richard gone." Moments later, Michael was hauled back into the room. He met Evelyn's accusation with a burst of raw anger, his chair screeching back as he slammed his palms onto the table. "You betrayed me," he roared. "My own wife, with him. And you think I'd poison him? You think I'd risk everything because of you?" His voice cracked under the weight of humiliation. Vargas let the storm rage, her gaze shifting between them, noting every flicker of resentment. She leaned forward. "If you're innocent, Michael, explain this." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, bank statements showing a hidden account in his name, swollen with nearly $5 million. Michael's bravado faltered, silence choking the room. The figure who had lived in Richard's shadow suddenly looked like the man holding the knife. The Financial Crimes Division sprawled with case files and glowing monitors, numbers dancing across spreadsheets. Vargas and Harper leaned over the analyst's shoulders as they traced the mysterious $5 million in Michael's hidden account. "Not his," the analyst finally said, tapping the screen. "The transfers don't originate from Richard's accounts. They funnel in from a shell corporation out of the Cayman Islands. Guess who holds majority control?" The screen flickered to display the name. Vanessa Cole. Vargas exhaled sharply. The widow had been siphoning funds all along, using Richard's downfall to cloak her schemes. She had just as much motive to silence him as anyone else, Vargas muttered. Meanwhile, Evelyn's lawyer dropped a folded paper onto Vargas's desk, a threatening note Richard had received weeks before his collapse. The handwriting was jagged, the words menacing. "Stop what you're doing, or you'll pay with your life." Vargas studied it carefully, suspicion coiling tighter. If Richard had been under threat, why hadn't he reported it? Forensic analysis came back quickly. The fingerprints on the note didn't belong to Evelyn, Vanessa, or Michael. They matched Richard Cole himself. "He wrote his own threats?" Harper asked, disbelief rough in his tone. "Looks like it," Vargas said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "A decoy, maybe to buy sympathy, maybe to hide a bigger scandal." It painted Richard not as a victim, but as a manipulator who had orchestrated shadows to cover his tracks. Still, someone had seized the opportunity to make his staged drama real. Vargas stared at the tangled board of suspects, her mind working through the knots. If Richard had been weaving lies for his own gain, who finally decided to cut the thread? The question lingered, heavier than the rain hammering the precinct windows. Detective Vargas stood at the evidence board, the threads of string crisscrossing like veins of a poisoned heart. Richard Cole's face stared back from the center, not as a victim, but as the architect of his own downfall. Forensic reanalysis of his blood told the story more clearly. Traces of midazolam stretching back weeks, smaller doses layered one over the other until his system was primed to collapse. Richard hadn't been poisoned in a single night. He had been dying slowly, piece by piece. Vargas whispered to Harper, "This wasn't an impulsive act. It was patience. Someone knew exactly how to rot him from the inside." Backtracking through, Richard's accounts revealed a darker plan. He had staged the threatening notes, shifted millions offshore through Vanessa's shell company, and promised Evelyn a new life with stolen funds. Richard was preparing to disappear, leaving his empire and his family behind. But someone beat him to the endgame. Evelyn, confronted again, sobbed through her confession. "He swore we'd run away together. He said Michael would never understand. He was going to choose me." Her tears blurred into fury. "If you think I'd kill him, you're wrong. I loved him, Detective." Vanessa, cold as glass, admitted to siphoning Richard's wealth but denied murder. "I wanted his money, not his death. I built the theater he paraded in. Do you think I'd ruin the stage?" That left Michael. Vargas returned to the footage, to the coat, to the visits after hours. The puzzle clicked into place. Michael had learned of the affair, of the stolen fortune, of the humiliation Richard had smeared across his life. Instead of exploding in rage, he had waited, dosing his brother quietly, calculatingly, until the gala provided the perfect stage for collapse. She found him at home, seated in the dark, a tumbler of whiskey untouched on the table. His eyes lifted as Vargas entered with officers at her back. "You figured it out," Michael said flatly. "Every drop you slipped into his system," Vargas replied. "Weeks of it. Slow poison for slow humiliation." Michael's voice cracked, yet his words carried venom. "He took everything, my pride, my wife, my place in this world. Do you know what it's like to be invisible? To be the shadow of a man who destroys you with a smile?" Vargas's cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, steel biting into flesh. Evelyn's voice echoed down the hall, screaming denial, while Michael lowered his head in silence. The mask had finally slipped. The shadow had stepped into the light. Not as the overlooked brother, but as Richard Cole's executioner. The courtroom was hushed, the kind of silence that thickened the air. Michael Cole sat at the defense table, his once pristine suits replaced by muted gray. His hands trembled slightly as the verdict was read. "Guilty of second-degree murder." Evelyn wept openly in the gallery, torn between fury and grief. She had lost her lover and her husband in one blow, her future shattered under the fluorescent lights. Vanessa, composed as ever, sat ramrod straight. If she mourned anything, it wasn't Richard. It was the empire now carved up by lawsuits and audits. Michael spoke only once before sentencing. His voice was soft, but every syllable carried the weight of decades. "I never wanted him dead. I only wanted him to feel small for once in his life. But the poison, it did what I couldn't take back." Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps as Michael was led away in cuffs. Cameras flashed like gunfire, capturing the broken fragments of a family built on lies. Detective Vargas stood apart from the chaos, her coat collar up against the autumn chill. Harper joined her, his expression weary. "Another empire? Rotting? From the inside," he muttered. Vargas nodded, though her gaze stayed fixed on the crowd. "Money, love, power, it always starts the same. But in the end, it's never about the numbers. It's about pride. Pride kills more people than bullets." Later, in the quiet of her office, she reviewed the final report. Richard Cole had tried to vanish into a life of stolen wealth and forbidden love, weaving deceit as tightly as his financial schemes. Yet the hand that ended him wasn't that of a spurned wife or a greedy widow. It was the brother who lived, in his shadow simmering until vengeance found its outlet in patience. She closed the file with a soft thud. Justice, in its cold form, was served. But justice never stitched the wounds left behind. Evelyn's eyes, Vanessa's steel mask, Michael's broken confession. They lingered like ghosts. Outside the city pulsed on, neon lights flickering across Wall Street as though nothing had changed. But Vargas knew better. Empires fall, secrets bleed, and every shadow eventually demands its due. As she shut off the lamp and left the precinct, her final thought clung like smoke in the night air. In this city, truth doesn't free you. It only cuts deeper.